Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Mildly Gothic, and if you are new here, what I like to do is a variety of artsy content. So what I have for you today is getting this further to this point in time. I again don't know the state that this is gonna get to by the end of this, but I'm so happy to at least show you that we got to a point of, wait for it, there's a full back too, and the whole under piece and everything. I believe the back might have been in the intro of the last video. Not important. She's colored. We're gonna get there. So much has freaking happened. I actually have the entire, here's a teaser. This is the jacket. I have this almost fully completed. I have more pieces for the belt and everything. I'm working on pieces for the sword right now. Like, so freaking much has happened, but this video is only gonna be continuing this chest plate, and then also the boot covers. So these go on to the shoes. They go on just like that and strap around the ankle. So I'll be showing you how I put these together and how I finish that thing up. This is still technically not even done. There's some painting that still has to be done. The color isn't quite right, especially considering the gold that I have. But all in all, I have a lot more pieces than I did. I have a lot more confidence than I did. And I mean, she's coming along really, really well. So thank you so much if you clicked on this video. I'm super excited to get into this and share with you how we got to this point and what is next to come. So if you've gotten to this point in the video, maybe consider giving a like and subscribe. Feed the YouTube algorithm. It would be kind of nice, maybe. You know, I'd appreciate it a lot. It'll help you see this little corner of the internet again, if that's what you so want. And with all of that said, I hope you stick around to the end of the video, and let's get to it. So let's get started with something super boring, and that is applying moldable clay foam to the chest plate. I learned so much after doing this. I wish I hadn't started with the most visible area, but it's okay. I'll explain in a second a little bit more of how to apply it, but really, I was just trying to go over and smooth those seams, and I will say, as I got better at this technique, it's proved insanely useful to smooth out edges between plates, make them look super seamless, sanding things down, and getting that really nice crisp edge or like slope that I wouldn't have been able to get by just cutting the foam. Okay, so I realize this probably looks worse. But the hope is that enough of these edges are smooth that I can sand this down, because I've actually finally gotten a decent idea of how to get this to be really nice and thin. And so you just got to get the clay wet enough, and then you can kind of literally spread it until it's a paste, and then place it where you want. And if it's where it needs to be, it'll absorb right into the foam, and if not, then I've just made another problem for myself, which is fine because this entire project is problems for myself, and in fact, one of my projects problems for myself. So let's try that again. Let's get a nice, really thin piece, and you place it on, and you can basically smooth the edges in, and though there's a small bump, it should be something that I can blend into the rest of the surroundings pretty easily. So I did a little bit on this side too. Not as many primary patches here. I'm not as concerned, I don't think, about this seam. I don't know why I went so ham with this one. I think there's something else there that bothered me. So we'll see how well or terribly this takes. And honestly, depending on that, we're gonna see where we go from here. I don't really want to start over, as I've kind of said. So yeah, I'm trying to keep my hopes up. I'm gonna be honest. It's a little hard right now. So I'm gonna measure that out over there, and then work with these that I've already made and wasted foam on, to see if there's any way that I can't get to figure out how small it should actually be instead. So, there we are. I need to let this dry, meaning it's going to be overnight, so I won't be able to touch this again until tomorrow. Stop touching it. Stop. Jesus. Okay. Anyways, on to something. Sanding time. Another time I've been so thankful to have this dress form. Having a solid surface to be able to press the foam against and be sure that I'm getting a curve that follows the end shape was so helpful, as was being able to stand and turn and move and just manipulate the dress form. So it'll come as a shock to no one that I'm stubborn. And with that comes some interesting, me deciding to do things a certain way. So I need triangles for part of the chest plate, right? And Michaels sells EVA triangle diamonds, except not currently, apparently, and they're only available in store, and they might be available somewhere else, but I have a timeline, so I'm kind of working with, limited stuff. But they do sell these squares, and by that I mean there were literally 2 of these left in the store, so I grabbed both of them. And I've actually now cut one of them in half. Not well, not with a tool that gives you an angle like you're supposed to, just holding it and making it happen. So what I think I'm gonna do is I'm now going to try to straighten up the edges ever so slightly, so it's not quite as jagged, but honestly, I think it works because it's gonna sit as flat and flush as it's going to, so I'm just gonna trim the littlest bit off of these guys right here, and then I can actually put these on. So making progress even though Michael's let me down. Would it surprise anyone to know that I did not use a straight edge when cleaning up these little tidbits on the side? I just used my X-Acto knife and made sure to hold it at a nice angle to just cut away and clean up and straighten up those edges, because this piece is going to be going across the center of the chest plate, so I had a feeling those wavy edges were going to be really, really noticeable. Also, shout out the camera for focusing on the logo on my compression gloves and not the mat. So to apply the center cross piece, I did it basically in 2 V sections. So I laid down the diamond piece that I had, the triangle piece that I had cut, marked where the center was, cut that flat, and then marked about where the end was going to be over the shoulder. Made sure to be very generous with that so I could figure out however I wanted to do the shoulder detailing later. And then I just cut an identical piece for the other side, glued them together with rubber cement, and once I had that as a unified piece, I then applied rubber cement to the full chest plate area and the little V piece, and starting in the center, pressed it in slowly and gently. I did pull up the little feet, as what I'm going to call them, of the decal on the upper part of the chest plate, and I actually used thread snips to cut most of the tiny foam legs or pieces on this project. As I was laying the foam down, I also made sure to hit it with my heat gun and kind of pin the base of the chest plate in place, because I was concerned with how thick this foam was. It wasn't going to mold to the shape as well, and so I wanted to make sure it was pinned in place so that it maintained the curvature and the molding that it needed to. I did the exact same process for the bottom V. I made sure to stick the center down first, use the heat gun to get everything set and organized the way I wanted it to be, and made sure that it was stuck in place. Again, pins to my advantage to keep the chest plate down, and pulled away the little feet where they were connecting with the V. I don't really know what to call them, and then used my thread snips to get as close as possible, so that I could get a smooth and seamless finish. Once I had the top and the bottom V's done, I used the details that I had already put on to map out how far to the right and left those center details needed to go. And then I used the smaller pieces that had been cut off the ends of those bigger V's and used those to kind of piece together the angles for the center. Getting the angle right on the edges that leaned up against the other pieces was so incredibly time consuming, and I ruined a few pieces because I got it wrong and I got the angle and the dimension wrong. But overall, it was just then making the little tiny pieces, again, heat gun, contact cement, getting those stuck in place, and being so incredibly happy with the result. So, as you can see, we have addressed the problem of the center not being done, and honestly, I'm kind of really happy with it. I'm having a really hard time because of my lighting in this room. I wish I had like better, more all-around lighting, because it plays with the shadows and stuff, and things that look right then aren't, and things that look not right are right. So, you know, we're kind of all over the place. But for where we are, let me get these pins out of here. I'm really happy with this chest. Because now what this does, and these look like everything looks really symmetrical, like we're on the right line. And so now I can go back to, and you see we have this smoothed out. So I think when this gets painted, everything's going to look right there. And so now I can go back to working on those side panels. There's a few bits here that I still have to sand, but that's fine. But now I can go back to working on those side panels because I actually have the angles that they're supposed to fit into and the size of the space they're supposed to go in. Don't know why I thought I could do this backwards. I can't. Something I'm going to do, I don't know if I'm going to film it just because I know it's going to be tedious. I got a little happy cutting some of these gaps, and there's some gaps in here. I'm going to take the moldable clay foam that I have, that I used for these, and try to fill it in just some of the more obvious places and get some of those to be nicer and more smoothed out. I'm hoping a lot of it'll kind of meld together when I prime it. It doesn't have to look perfect, is what I'm telling myself. But one thing to note, yes, these stick out more than her actual costume. But two things. One, these were easier to do. And two, I think they get the point across. So I'm not like super concerned. But I am going to use that moldable clay foam and stick it in all those little tiny cracks and crevices where I do want it to look nice and seamless. So, but now back to side panels part 2, Electric Boogaloo. So we'll see what I can do with it. But we are definitely getting somewhere, and it looks like something, and I'm really happy. I have spent so many hours on this. I'm not sure what the last little talkie bit I recorded was, and I know I haven't done a lot of time-lapse stuff, because let me just say, these side pieces gave me a nightmare of a time. And I know for a fact they're not the most even or symmetrical, but I think from a distance, one, there's so much going on. I don't think you can really tell that this one's now bothering me, but we're gonna not look at it. I think once it's all primed and painted, it's going to be a little bit different, and I'll be able to rationalize it in my head. So what I think I'm going to do now is I'm going to trim these up, because now I can start. I don't really want to start doing the edging. I do still have to figure out the entire back to this thing. That hasn't been done yet. And then the other thing is I have to even out the bottom, because there's actually a whole nother like 2-inch strip that goes all the way around. So the chest piece isn't fully done yet. But even with that, I think I'm going to trim up the sleeves a little bit. I might put the collar piece on, or at least pattern out how I want the back to work. I am going to put some light detailing on the back. I'm not going to leave it completely blank, because I don't think something that has this much detail on the front is going to be completely blank on the back. So I'm probably just going to try to mimic those diamond patterns kind of on the top and bottom, and I might just leave it at that, because it's something, but also it's going to be covered up by the jacket most of the time. I also might go watch some episodes and reference and see if there's some photos of the back, because online I can't find anything. But, Jesus, we are finally here as far as getting the majority of the detailing on this top. So now we get to trim up the edges and make this look a little bit more wearable. So my decidedly bizarre method of getting an even line across the bottom was to take the tiny level that comes in some command strip packaging and my pencil and just kind of make a line all the way across, assuming I'm holding it at the consistent height for what I need. I was essentially also using the underlining of the dress form, because the top part overlaps the bottom, and so there's an edge there. So I was using both that edge and my tiny level to kind of draw a straight line all the way across. The reason I did this at all was because I just remember distinctly last year with the Mandalorian armor having such a hard time getting that line to be straight, so I decided, what makes a straight line? A level does. Was this the easiest way I could have done this? Definitely not. But did it work? The answer to that question is yes, it actually did. What I used as my reference point is there was already a high point on kind of both the sides because the bottom triangle tucked up. So I used that as my high point and made sure I could draw a line across the front where those two met and just continue that onto the sides. Once I had the bottom straightened and sorted out, it was time to move on to the back. So I went back to Old Faithful parchment paper and kind of mapped out where the neckline was going to be and where one of the shoulders and where one of the armholes was, because I decided I was going to do the back in just 2 pieces. It was going to make my life a lot easier to just do 2 symmetrical pieces, so I only had to pattern out one half,
because very simply, I would just duplicate it to get the other half. So a lot of pinning, crinkling, lining, and cutting, and I made sure, because I know I've been bitten by this before, I made sure to be very generous in where I drew my lines and where I ended up cutting some of the pieces of foam to make sure that I was going to be able to get enough wrap around the sides. That's one of the things I was very concerned about, was making sure that this would actually close on the sides and I had enough space to do joinings of both like snaps and also just gluing the foam together in general. Just like I did the front, once I had the foam pieces cut out, I used my heat gun to mold it into place, and I also made sure to pin it together. This proved a little bit more challenging than the front because there is a gap all the way down the center, so it meant that I could not lay it completely flat all the way across the dress form, but that's okay. I just did the best that I could, pinned it in place, used the heat gun to kind of mold it, and then glued that center back seam shut, just all the way down a little bit at a time, pressing them together, keeping it all on the dress form to make sure that I could maintain that shape as much as possible. Okay, so I'll figure out the framing, but I wanted to show off, I only have one of them on right now because I'm going to do one and I think I can mirror it. So these are the shoes that I bought for this outfit. These were pretty expensive. When I bought them, they were $90. They were actually on sale though. These things were typically, I think, almost $160 or something. So would not have bought them for that price, but I like them anyways. And the great thing is the attachment that I'm going to do on these is going to be completely removable. So I just have these for my wardrobe now. I need to make a buckle that goes around the center part. It's going to have the Mirror Universe, the Terran Empire symbol on it. It's going to be mostly black with some gold trim. So I have one shoe on to attempt to pattern this while I am wearing it. We'll see how it goes. And I'm going to make a little foam detail for it. And other than that, I now just have these as shoes. Who loves parchment paper? I love parchment paper. Again, to kind of make the pattern, I just sat on the floor with one of the boots on, and patterning this was actually a little bit more awkward than it seemed. The heel of the shoe kind of kept sliding around on the floor, but I did the pattern twice. So first I did a super rough cut marking out how far I wanted it to go down on the shoe, how high up, and where I thought that underpiece would go. And then I cut it out because the shoe is so small that working with a full sheet of parchment paper was just not doing it. So cut out the first attempt and then folded and creased that so it more accurately fit the final shape that I needed it to on the shoe. And then laid out that new piece with the folds and cut out a nice clean pattern piece from that. And that's what I eventually ended up transferring to my foam and fully cutting out. In order to get nice long strips to place on the top and bottom edge of the boot pattern, I literally just cut nice long strips out of the foam. I have given myself freedom that if these strips are not perfect from a distance, no one will be able to tell, and it is the only way that my sanity can take cutting out so many of them. So I used contact cement and applied it to the edges of my boot pattern and also those thin strips. And if you'll notice, there is an L on the inside of this one, and that is because the pattern is very specific to the shoe. So I need to keep track of which one is the left shoe and which one is the right one, so that when I put all the fasteners and attachments on, everything works the way it's supposed to. When it comes to putting on these outer edging details, I do it either one of two ways. I lay it directly on top of the foam so that the face that you see has two layers, or I do it on the edge of the foam. So when you look at it straight on, it's sitting on top of the edge, not the flat face. When I do it on the flat face like I'm doing here, I just make sure that the edge is nice and smooth. That's the only edge that people are really going to be able to notice. They're not really going to notice if it's shifted too much into the center space, but they likely will see if there's a gap up at the top. So slow and steady wins the race anytime you're trying to add these edge details to foam armor. So one of the unique details on these little shoe covers are these tiny, tiny globes that are part of the Mirror Universe Terran Empire symbol. And the way I decided to create them was using googly eyes. Another thought that I had is the very classic of getting glass stones in circles and painting the underside, but I didn't have any of those on hand, and I was worried they might be too big and heavy. So instead, I cannibalized some googly eyes. I just cut the bottom off with an X-Acto knife, just kind of made a hole, and then peeled it off and used my scissors to clean up the edge. And once you get that done, you have a nice clear dome that you can paint the inside, and it's also incredibly lightweight because it is very, very thin plastic. You do have to be careful. It's really easy for these googly eye shells to rip, so be calm, be gentle, be patient while cannibalizing googly eyes.
So while I'm waiting for those to dry, I've cut out some tiny foam circle. Ooh, do not. Oh, Jesus. I've cut out some tiny foam circles that those are going to get placed on for the side ones for the shoe. I have those, and that's just going to go just in the straight center. So those need to dry before I can do anything else. I think the shoe covers are going to look really good. In the meantime, this guy. So, I have the back fully patterned, as I've probably showed. So what I have to figure out now is how I want to make this thing wearable. And I'm thinking, because the one thing is this is up very close to the neck, so there is no way this is going to get over my head. So what I'm thinking of doing is one shoulder and one side seam. Because the other thing is this is very tight fitting. So even if just the shoulders opened, I don't think I can get my shoulders through, like, the shoulders and chest through the side. So I definitely think I'm gonna have to have a side seam. And the nice thing is there is some detailing like on the side. So right next to this is basically supposed to be this vertical bar that goes down. And I'm gonna take advantage of that to essentially be the seam point on the side for obviously the opening. I'm not entirely sure how I want to do the seam for the top, but I think I'm going to work on patterning out this layer for the side and some of the diagonal pieces that I can see sort of go on to the back, and we'll go from there.
So I decided once I had all of the tiny circles and the arrowhead cut out that I was going to go ahead and apply those to the base of the boot cover, as I'm kind of calling them, so that I could prep and paint all of that foam at once and not have to do it separately and then glue it on. I wanted all of the details outside of the domes to be on before I went ahead and primed and painted it. So just contact cement and being very, very careful to try to get things as centered and even as possible.
So for the reveal, it's still technically not done, but look, we are making so much freaking progress. These are the exact same motifs that are on the front as far as the top and bottom. If you'll notice, the pieces that I'm doing here are not the angled ones like they are on the front. This is the back, and so I do want the dimension of them being raised, but I don't want them to stick out nearly as much, so I'm just doing a thicker foam that's just flat to kind of still get the illusion of the raised edges, but not really have to worry about that. Still not sure how to deal with the shoulder closures, which is why that hasn't been seamed up over there, but I am super, super duper close to calling this done. I'm not going to do this exactly. I think I'm going to do a more simplified version of the angle detailing here, just to make my life a little bit easier. Again, this is the back, and no one really will see this, but again, I can't in good conscience leave this unfinished. Like, what if I want to take the jacket off? It needs to have something and, like, look like it fits. So that's where we are with this. I'm really freaking happy with it so far, though. This thing has taken me, I don't know if I've said it yet, I want to say I've easily spent at least 12 hours on this thing, if not more so far, just based on the weekend time that I've spent, and then at least 1 to 2 hours every night for the past week. So it's been a significant amount of time, but she's coming together, and I am so excited. I believe I have a case of what is referred to as a happy accident. So this is one of the pieces from the front when I had to rip this off and then try again, mostly due to the fact that that front shape was not what I needed it to be. It actually needed to be curved to work for the front. But here's the great thing. It doesn't need to be curved for the back. And that lines up just about perfectly with the corner seams there and kind of where I need it to sit. So I think, because I saved all of them, because I like to be resourceful and use my scraps, I do believe that I don't have to make anything new for the back,
and I can just reuse these pieces that I already had. And it technically matches the front because it's the same general structure. So I've just saved myself a bunch of time by wasting time earlier. So I've at least found 3 of them. I think I have all 4 of them somewhere. But yeah, I'm just gonna reuse these pieces because I already have them, they're already cut out, and they already fit the space. So why cut more things out that I don't need? And so here's some quick footage of me putting it on. And we're about to jump right back to the boot covers. The reason these keep going back and forth between these two is because when I was getting frustrated with the chest plate, I would go work on the boot covers. When I was getting frustrated with the boot covers, I went back to the chest plate. So this is a very true bouncing back and forth and just trying to get everything done. So not shown was me priming the boot covers. I used Plasti Dip. It is a spray. By default, it is black, so it provides a really, really nice base. I was hoping to be able to use that as the main black component of this and not have to paint it. Unfortunately, the black was not opaque enough for me to do that. But I did, I first started with a more vintage gold, but then decided to go to the more true yellow gold after I did like 2 layers of the vintage gold, of course. And that gold goes on the top and bottom strips and also on those 3 little details on the center of the boot cover. So I just used a nice thin brush to kind of paint all around these, and when it was mostly dry, I then of course went back in with the brighter gold. So the way I attach these little googly eye earths to my boot covers was I kind of etched with my X-Acto knife kind of the holes of where I wanted it because they are supposed to look like they sit more sunken in. So I kind of poked a bunch of holes in the hope that I'd be able to press the googly eye into it. It kind of worked. I don't know if it really ended up mattering that much, but I did it, so I wasted some time. I did use super glue to attach the googly eyes on. They're super light, it dries super quick, it stuck perfectly well, everything was all good with that, so just some super glue, and then pressed the googly eye in super, super quickly. Did my best to not get super glue on my fingers. Probably should have done this wearing glove. Remember, kids, safety first, always the most important part. So the other detail for the boot covers are the straps, of course. The foam is what wraps underneath the boot, but there is a strap that goes around the ankle. So I just used some spare black fabric that I had and kind of cut 2 rectangular-ish pieces out of it. I didn't really worry about getting clean edges or anything. I did buy those nice, you can see the gold D-rings. I think they are the perfect color match and also the perfect size. So I cut out black strips of fabric that I thought would be about the right length, and then ironed them to fold over those edges. The end pieces of this are these nice little... The end pieces that look like they do the attachment are these kind of teardrop shaped, but with a blunt edge, not a point. So I cut those out of foam and did another little gold circle, and those will have a googly eye earth on them as well. And I did use my sewing machine to sew down the edges of the black fabric and fold it back over on itself to sew the gold in place. So I am not the smartest sometimes, and here's one of those moments. So I was like, oh man, this looks super great, until I realized the way this attachment is going to work is this has to fold over, meaning this is actually the exposed section, which isn't terrible because most of it is going to get covered with this. And I don't know if I explained in the voiceover, I'm lazy and hate myself, and so I didn't switch out my thread with black, also because I can't find my black thread. But, you know, and I was already out and about, and I don't feel like going out to the store and getting more black thread, so I just painted it black, which is probably what I'll do again. So I have a few things done. So I have one side of the cover attached to the little loop, and so this is also, I love the way these look so far. I'm so freaking excited. They're gonna look so good on the shoe. So this is the outside, and so I needed to make sure that these were of the right size that I believe. I don't think I've screwed it up. Yeah. With a little gentle force, those will go through and those sit on the other side just like so. So in reality, the only part that really needs to be covered in the Velcro is this part right here. So I do kind of need to figure out the sizing and how much goes, like, do I need all of this? How much do I get to glue in? That whole, 9 yards. But because this goes down towards the end of the shoe, this is towards the top. And then I also still have to figure out how I want to attach it. There is extra here, that's why this isn't painted, so like that's not a big concern. But this looks so freaking good. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited. These, I don't know, have come together really quickly, except I kind of screwed this part up. Luckily, this would be really easy to redo, and I might just rip this off. Okay, I think that's the easy solution, is I'm going to rip this off and just glue it back down in the better way, because now that means when this folds over, the back part that's mostly showing, oh my god, that was actually way easier, and it's probably because the glue hasn't fully cured yet, so please tell me the other one's gonna be just as easy. Yay. Here's for probably not gluing this fully down in the first place. So I'll put some more glue on and make sure that that's nice and set. Cool, now I don't have to worry about that as much. I'm gonna take a little bit of that off. Lot of ums. I would not win a Toastmasters competition, but that's okay. That's not what we're trying to do. So, all right, that's a little bit easier, because all I wanted to do is put a small square of Velcro and have this basically just fold directly over on top of it, and now I'll just paint that little thing. And again, these are for the boot, so I don't think anyone's going to be looking at it too closely. So I'll make sure that's nice and glued in, and then I'm going to get that painted and get the Velcro attached, which I'll probably sew on just for, since I can, it is sewable Velcro. Oh, and that's something I wanted to make a PSA about. When purchasing Velcro, be super careful what kind you're purchasing. There's going to be a symbol here. It's either going to have a needle and thread, or it's going to have a circle with a line through it that shows a bobbin, or like a spool of thread. This, with just the needle and thread, this means you can sew it, meaning your sewing machine's going to go right through it. Any needle, you can hand sew it, any of that. If it has the circle with the line through it, you cannot sew it. It's got a much harder plastic background. And just because it's sewable does not mean that it is non-adhesive. There are adhesive sewable Velcro, so it'll have the sticky back, but it is also sewable. That kind of gets up to personal preference. I don't want the adhesive back when I'm doing the sewable. That just feels like a disaster waiting to happen. I don't know. I don't like it. But make sure you pay attention to whether or not you need sewable or non-sewable Velcro. It will make a difference in how you can work with it, and trust me, you will save yourself some sanity if you pay attention to the symbol and buy the right one the first time. This is actually one of the biggest mistakes I made with my Mandalorian cosplay last year, is I did not buy sewable Velcro and had a absolute nightmare of a time trying to get it onto the costume because I didn't realize that there was a difference at first. I feel like it sounds like something that should be pretty self-explanatory. I wasn't paying attention. I just needed Velcro, grabbed it, and dealt with the consequences. So that you don't make that same mistake, look at that symbol, make sure you pick the right one.
So I didn't realize that I completely didn't film any of the putting together of this motif or explaining it, but basically I looked at an image of her and it looks like there is basically a simple pattern that repeats all the way around the belt. So I just kept cutting out pieces of that motif and put them on a long strip until it ended up being long enough. This is me just adding those two final edges, just like I did for the collar and the armholes earlier. So to close up one shoulder and one vertical side, I did the same process. I cut out a rectangle that was long enough to go completely from one side to the other out of my medium thickness of foam, the same one that I used for the trimming along the neckline and along the edges of the belt. And I made a relatively large rectangle. I think it ended up being about an inch, if not slightly larger than an inch wide. And then, of course, the full length of that distance. And I decided to layer a thin piece on top of it so that it wasn't just some large flat rectangle. It had another detail layer on top of it to kind of make it blend in and match the aesthetic of the overall chest plate.
So I'm working on the shoulder joints, and so this shoulder is fully attached, and this is the shoulder that is opposite where the belt buckle is going to be. The belt buckle is going to be on her right side. So this shoulder is fully attached, and this one is going to open. And so the way that I'm doing this is I have my same little attachment, but it's only currently glued to the front half of the costume. And so what I'm going to use is there's these little snaps. I used them actually in my Faye Valentine costume that just snap together. These are very small, they're very light, but also this EVA foam is very light, and I'm hoping it doesn't have, I'm not going to move so freaking much. But my plan is to basically line at least 5, if not 6 of them along this seam. And I'm going to use super glue because I'm pretty sure super glue will stick to these guys pretty well. And then I'm going to glue the tops in to here, and then hopefully it will just snap in place. And I think that'll create a really nice, slightly elevated, but also hopefully not super elevated or visible join. So that's where we are right now, and I'm waiting for some of these pieces to fully cement dry themselves in. I'm also debating if I actually want to glue that on right now or if I want to wait until after I prime it, but I do think I want to glue it on so then I can get the center of the neck lined and I can glue the sides down. I've just been kind of waiting for these shoulders to go on, and 1 out of 2, so let's try to get.
Once I had the pegs Gorilla Glued on, I then decided to paint the tips of them so that I could press the other side of the foam into it and get a marker of where the center of the other side needed to be. Because I couldn't glue these both in place at the same time, otherwise I would have glued them shut, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of it being a closure. So I put just a little dot of paint on the peg of each of these clasps and tried very carefully to press the other side on top of it, and it worked perfectly, and I was able to glue the other side exactly where it needed to go. I realize I referenced this part earlier. That's just because in thinking about the whole process, it is the same foam that I used here. So this is the same foam that I used on the shoulder joints. It's just a slightly larger thickness, and this allowed for nice, crisp, clean edges. This is the step where in my Mandalorian costume, I got contact cement all over my dress form, so I did my absolute best not to cover her in even more contact cement.
I am very, very happy to report that it fits. It's not in frame well, but it does in fact fit. My little snap closure works quite well, and I think hides decently well. Oh my goodness, I almost need another one to just pull that edge down. Again, it is going under a jacket, so I don't know how much it's gonna matter, but it probably will matter enough to me, so we'll see. So next is attaching the side. So this is the shoulder that opens, so this is going to be the side that opens. Ow, I stabbed myself on a pin. So this is going to be the side that is held shut. And there is a slight, so obviously, of course, just in continuing dress form, not being exactly like reality, I did try it on, and it may just be from holding the sides and also just wanting a little bit of room to breathe. Instead of, because on my dress form, I can like fold and overlap these and pull it tight, but you know, I'd like some room to breathe and move. So I'm actually gonna put the seam as if these two were about lined up, if not spaced just a little bit further out. It does still appear this circular armhole is perfectly fine, so like that's not gonna change. But what will change, in fact, is how, if I can, there we go. These lay next to each other. I'm going to do it a little bit more like that. And I'm gonna basically mimic exactly what I did for the shoulder bit up here. A thick piece that I've had cut out for a while. I've actually had these cut out for a hot minute. They might actually be too thin now that I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing. But yeah, probably I might cut these out a little thicker. But this is going to be kind of what the gist of what the shoulder join looks like. And for styling purposes, I'm thinking of adding like just another vertical line or so on either side to kind of help blend it into the general styling and make it look less like a super visible seam. So that's where we are with this. Finally attaching everything together. And then once I get this side done, I'm probably going to, I think I'm going to carve just a little bit more out of the arm so that I can lay
another really clean lining on it. We are so close to being able to prime and paint this thing. And when I do, it's either gonna look great and I'm gonna be super happy, or it's gonna look ugly and I'm gonna cry. So to be determined. I know, super vote of confidence. I'm really excited. I think we're going in a great direction, but you know, there's always that little bit of what if everything just comes crashing down at the last second. But hey, what's crafting without a little fear? I'm just cutting out a new piece because why would I do this while not on camera? That's about yay. Seems. I know it's thicker, but again, I really don't want this thing splitting open on me. Like, I am slightly terrified of that happening. So I would rather cover a large section. And again, I'm going to put a detailing stripe there. I'm going to put one on the center and maybe something just coming off the edge here. So I'm going to go ahead and get this glued on and see where to go from there.
And with that, here we are at the end. So I'm really, really happy with how everything on this thing has turned out so far. And I cannot wait to share more of this. There's gonna be, I think, at least 2 more videos on the rest of this costume and how all of it's getting put together. There's just so much detail that's going into it. And I'm having a very hard time actually recording the little bits and pieces, so we're working through it. But at the very least, I'm going to share my steps along the way and how I made the decisions I did and why, and I look forward to you maybe stopping in on the next part of that. So if you want to see how this costume finishes out, let me know in the comments down below what you think of where we are so far. And yeah, that's about it. So with all of that, I will see you in the next one.